Oh, yeah.
All right, we're back again. Me and Joseph. I'm Vincent Tseng on Instagram as at the.wandering.warrior. Joining me is Joseph.
Joseph Levitis at Wushu Moscow on Instagram. And yeah, I'm a student of Leah Profatilov. I practice traditional Chinese martial arts, particular Meihua Tanlan. And my previous background in martial arts is Muay Thai and traditional boxing.
That's right. And for me, right now in Taiwan, studying Shuai Jiao, which is sort of this Mongol Chinese wrestling. And I have a background in praying mantis boxing as well, although from a different line, and done BJJ and spent some time in MMA gyms. So this leads us right to the topic of today, which has to do with the internal and external impressions of traditional Wushu and how they relate to MMA, combat sports, and the times that we are in now. So without further ado, let's get to it.
Yeah. So I would say the purpose of this is to talk about how traditional techniques of Chinese martial arts, and in particular the praying mantis style that we have both practiced, can be applied in MMA and combat sports, in boxing, Muay Thai, grappling, and so on and so forth, in all kinds of ranges of fighting under different rules.
Okay.
Which is like a question that is being raised a lot. Can it be used in combat sports? It's raised from different kinds of points of view. One is that it cannot be used in combat at all. The other that it's for street only and it cannot be used in combat sports.
Yeah.
Which I disagree with on both points.
Myself as well, but let's explore this. What angle should we tackle it from to start with?
All right. Well, let's see that there's a like. Do you think that Chinese martial arts in general have been misrepresented, or maybe misunderstood, or maybe both?
I think both. I think both. And I think the misrepresentation from within the Chinese martial arts community makes the misunderstanding of it even easier, in my opinion. Yeah. I think just a few things that come to mind right away, although this dives a little into history, but it is what it is. You know, when we hit the early 1900s, we have people trying to package traditional Wushu in a way that is useful to themselves or useful to the modern day, right? Because everyone can tell, oh, traditional warfare is subsiding. Traditional village on village violence is, things are changing, right? And so the martial arts, if they're to survive, they're such an important part of the culture, especially at that point and prior. If it's to survive, it's got to serve a new purpose. So we see some arts really going the military or combatives or self-defense kind of route. We see some arts going more sporting. We start seeing modern shuaijiao start appearing. We start seeing sanda type things start to appear. But then we also see this whole trend towards internal cultivation, and we start seeing a lot more emphasis on taolu for taolu's sake forms, kata, and so I think at that time there's already division inside the so-called Chinese martial arts community as far as what this stuff is supposed to be for the people. Is it exercise? Is it military combatives? Is it a vessel of traditional culture? What is it, right? I think there's a lot of competing ideas of what it should be, which speaks to how rich this entire heritage is, but makes the subject complex And then, you know, when you have the so-called Western world looking at this stuff, they say, oh, well, they have all kinds of accounts from completely useless, pathetic people pretending to be fighters, all the way to, well, this is a bit of an antiquated way to fight, but they're pretty good at it. And everything in between. You know, and some of our, in the Western world, some of our great combatives, pioneers like Fairbairn, who spent time in Shanghai, he was deep in the world of, well, Chinese martial arts being applied in a gang setting, right? And that's part of where his whole view on combatives developed, which is pretty influential on the Western world. But then we have a lot of Chinese, I guess, pugilists getting beaten in the boxing ring, and then a few notable victories. And, you know, we have to juxtapose those kind of experiences. So I think the lack of continuity and the misunderstandings or the misrepresentations from within the Chinese community, they make it really complex for the casual observer on the outside, who, if they just see one angle of this entire thing, are going to have this very different impressions.
Yeah. So, yeah, from what I've learned from Shifu Prafatil's research is that basically the transfer of Wushu from village setting, where it was a necessity for survival, to the city setting, where it was a more of a pastime, sort of, for people with
A luxury.
a hobby, right? Is what really killed Wushu, in his opinion. You know, not, well, I would, you know, that's putting it dramatically, but you know, it has changed it dramatically to where it was like, you know, lots of partnered practice, really hard physical training, and then you get to apply it in life and dance scenarios, and to where it's like a lot of like 180 forms per style, with no application whatsoever, and so on and so forth. And I think that's a big part of that.
We could call it gentrification. I mean, you look at boxing, kickboxing, Muay Thai that is applied in a fitness, CrossFit gym setting purely for cardio. You see some really bad roundhouses and bad combinations. Like, you look at it and you're just like, oh no, don't ever get into a fight. Please. Just use that cardio you got and run away.
It's exactly, you know, it's very funny because I run into like people that do fitness boxing, like a lot. Like now it's a thing in Russia as well.
Yeah.
And they think they're doing boxing.
Yes.
They don't know the difference.
Yeah.
They don't know the difference at all. They're like, they've never been hit at all. They're like girls that do like pad work, and then they're like, oh, I do boxing. I'm okay, you do some form of boxing.
I've had a similar experience. Oh, I do kickboxing.
Right.
You're gonna break your own ankle. Like, please don't please don't do this. There's an art and a science to maybe more self-defense oriented boxing, and then there's the sport of boxing, which is also, it's a beautiful thing. But whatever you're doing there, that's I can't say it's wrong, but it definitely goes into the same thing that we see in the Chinese martial arts community already, which is that it does come from the martial tradition, but it's become its own gentrified thing. It's useful to the people doing it. They enjoy it. They get something out of it. It's definitely not fight training anymore, right?
Yeah.
So that's definitely an issue. And I think maybe it's been a longer standing issue in the Chinese martial arts community. And so maybe that issue has permeated this longer. Whereas you're starting to see some BJJ gyms kind of veer off in a weird direction. You're starting to see, you know, this fitness, boxing, fitness, kickboxing starting to become this like cool thing in gyms for fitness. Who knows, maybe 50 years from now, there's going to be an issue with these type of arts. Same kind of issue, right? But yeah, I think that gentrification is a big part. And it's also gentrification when a competitive fighting format that everyone could agree upon wasn't entrenched in society, I think. Because even today, Shuai Jiao is like, oh yeah, Shuai Jiao, but then people are kind of like, yeah. They say the propaganda is that, of course, it's Chinese wrestling since 5,000 years ago, but not really. And I think deep down people know that, and I think that's part of why there's a lot of people who are, it's like, oh no, I do pure Chinese martial arts. I don't. And that's a whole nother issue because of the nationalism of the era. And then Sanda, there's actually a surprising number of traditional martial artists who don't want to compete in Sanda, and they say it's kickboxing. They say it's bastardizing Chinese martial arts and all that kind of stuff. Whereas to me, at least to my eye, I see it's not perfect per se, with the gloves and everything for traditional martial arts, but it gives you a good testing ground and a good pipeline towards MMA if that's ever your goal,
Sure.
Yeah. So gentrification, that's a big deal for sure.
Yeah. All right. So can Wushu be applied? Wushu as an art form, can it be applied in modern combat? I mean, to me, it's the answer is very clear, but I want to hear your opinion.
Well, yeah, after you hear my opinion, I actually want to hear about your experiences, because I think you have much more. I think we kind of meet in the middle, where I have more grappling experiences and some striking. You have a lot of striking experiences into grappling. I think we have a pretty good blend of experiences we can think back on. But I mean, yes, I think these things can be used. I think it's just a matter of the way you are looking at it or you conceptualize it, right? To me, for example, if I parry and I jab, the skill I'm working is parry and strike, the timing and spacing for that. I don't have to eye jab. I could use a palm, I could use a fist, right? I don't have to do this. So
Right.
to me, that if someone is a traditional stylist says, oh, but this stuff can't be used in the ring or in the octagon, I'll say, sure, eye jabs are illegal. You shouldn't do that. But if you have your eye jabs down, then the skill that you're working on should be parry, oftentimes at an angle where you've got the arms, depressed, and whatever this hand is going to be, right? Deploy weapon.
Yeah.
So
Right.
So if you got the core skill down, then it shouldn't matter what this thing is, right? If you, if sure, you're not supposed to blow someone's knee out. Just kick right above the knee. You stop them in their tracks. If you do what's called like a cross kick or oblique kick or side kick to the knee, if you have that skill down, that's such a fundamental skill in so many traditional martial arts, especially Chinese martial arts. Someone's coming in, kick their knee. You're going in on somebody, kick their knee. It's a great thing to do. Maybe not for their knee, but kick right above their knee. You should have that skill. So you can't tell me that, oh, well, yeah, I'm not allowed to break people's knees. Oh, yes, you shouldn't be breaking people's knees, but you can still use that skill that you worked on, right?
Yeah, that's I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's like the argument that kills me every time, like with the traditional guys, that they're like, oh, it's too deadly, we cannot use it, because it's not allowed. Like there's techniques that like I'm gonna poke your eyes and I'm gonna grab your nuts and
Yeah.
break your knees. Okay, don't do that. Just
Yeah.
hit
Is there anything
different
else in martial
areas.
art?
Right?
Yeah.
Can
Oh,
you
I can't grab your ear.
please not hit me in the knee? Just hit right next to it, or
Yeah.
like you're so fine tuned you can only hit the knees.
Okay. Nut shots, like kicking the nuts is
Right.
not allowed. Okay. You can adjust it to the side and kick the inside of the thigh. That hurts.
That's
That hurts a lot.
that hurts a lot. Yeah,
That hurts
yeah.
a lot.
Very painful.
And if
Yeah.
you're talking about the vertical axis, okay, fine. The snap kick to the nuts, no. You can snap kick to the gut. You can snap kick to the solar plexus. You can snap kick their chin and knock them out. I mean, isn't this the same skill? Once you have this open,
Yeah.
pop up the middle, right?
Right. Right. Right.
So I
That's
don't buy that
brings
argument
up.
at all.
Mhm.
Yeah,
That
I don't like this.
brings up another question, which is I think where we would want to concentrate a little bit is the ranges of combat that wushu offers, because like
Mm,
different kinds of arts offer different kind of ranges. Like
mhm,
boxing is middle range, really. I mean, there is a thing called long range in boxing, but if you involve kicking, that becomes your middle range and close range, but
yes.
then there's no uh, like Muay Thai, for example, has a much closer range weapons like knees and elbows that you cannot use in boxing.
Mhm,
Or Taekwondo has the longest range where you can
right.
jump kick somebody, and it shows that it is effective in certain kind of circumstances. I mean, look, what's his name? Fabricio Verdum has jumped kicked people, and he's not a
Oh,
Taekwondo guy, but
yeah. Yeah.
he did really well. He learned that jumping sidekick and used that really well. So, like, in my opinion, like wushu has probably one of the most diverse range games out of all traditional and combat arts,
Hmm.
with one little exception being the ground, as in BJJ, because there's some ground fighting in wushu,
Yeah.
as we know, like
There's a little bit.
some dog styles or Digon, styles that actually have ground fighting, but it's like more like kicking on the ground and sweeping, a little bit less of wrestling on the ground.
I think see on this one, I think it really depends on what system or school or style of Wushu you're coming from. Because
Sure.
if you look at a lot of the Southern styles, especially coming out of the Hakka people or the Minnan people, Min people in
Mhm.
Fujian, Hokkien, their Kuntao is like almost all medium close range. It's like, most of their strikes range wise would be like boxing without jab and cross
Mhm.
or closer into Muay Thai clinch territory. Right. And they got some trips and they got some, pushing people over and stuff like that, but not much into throwing per se, not specifically. Uh, and then Wing Chun is not, uh, part of that group per se, but they share a similar range. Their longest thing is oftentimes just including these other arts, usually just a forward kick, get in, and then do what you do, right? So they're a little more restricted in range, generally speaking. But then we look at something like Mantis, almost all Mantis schools have longer range strikes and kicks, closer range striking with elbows and knees, and a variety of throws. And I think different lineages emphasize these a little differently, but it's all there. And many of the lineages have some amount of ground sweeps, things to sweep someone down and get back up, kick someone from the ground. It's not ground fighting in terms of like ground submission grappling, but it's how to flip what would traditionally be a bad situation around in a way, and ideally get back up. Right.
Yeah.
So we're actually kind of in a way privileged for this conversation, which is that we are studying a system which is a little more analogous to MMA, but from the traditional setting. You look at Xing Yiquan, and I'm not sure that they're all that well-rounded in the same way. They're that whole family of systems seems to have very good capabilities for punching powerfully and busting in, but maybe a lot less in the actual clinch work and tripping and throwing, tactical toolkit, right? Toolbox. So I think there's certain styles such as Mantis that are more equipped for this kind of thing, and others that weren't necessarily that well equipped. They're probably just fine for their context, but maybe not specifically for MMA. Yeah. Whereas I think the art that we have in common, Mantis boxing is fairly well suited for most of it.
Yeah, I would say, like with the uh, array of weapons that Mantis has, really all you need to do is add maybe some groundwork, submission wrestling or submission wrestling defenses, and you got a pretty solid, background for like MMA, for example.
I speaking from personal experience, when I used to frequent MMA gyms back when I was in the USA, I found that standing up, I could hold my own. Doing BJJ drills, I was a blue belt level, so within people relatively close to my level, I could hold my own. But here I think is one of the big things that I took away was I wasn't yet good at transitioning my skill set in Mantis and BJJ and being able to play back and forth with that. So maybe traditionally, I throw the person down, or I trip them, or I've knocked them down. Okay, cool. But there's that disconnect between that and ground and pound or ground submissions, and that, to be honest, that disconnect exists with a lot of MMA fighters as well. I think depending on how your gym trains it, you can see it sometimes where someone knocks someone down and there's that like split second hesitation, like, oh, do I go in? Oh yeah, I got to go in. I got to jump on him, And some guys have obviously smoothed that out. My experience was that I was not used to it at that time, and judo has helped me with that. Another thing that I noticed was that I wasn't used to certain scenarios, like wrestling up against the fence, and people who come from a wrestling background in especially when applied to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA, they'll go to their knees all the time to get the takedown. It might not be a great takedown from the traditional perspective, whether it's Shuaijiao in terms of like stand-up wrestling, or Mantis and having a more street fighting, self-defense oriented mindset. But it works in MMA and it works in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I think that was another like switch I had to make in my head, which is like, okay, all the same principles apply, but these guys are willing to get down on their knees to make something happen. And I'm not really supposed to pound them on the back of their head. So that's my normal answer to that kind of thing. What do I do now? I need to have some answers. And so those are answers. Those are things that can be worked out, but it was a bit of a tough transition for me at that time. But if someone wants to jab cross me, kick, cross kick, oblique kick. You can use movement, you can parry, you can block, right? This all that stuff is still valid. I didn't feel like, oh, someone wants to Muay Thai clinch. Okay, I can clinch too. We have our own clinch work. Elbows, knees. They're the same things. The flavor for the takedowns and throwing is a bit different, but I mean, a single leg, a double leg, those are single legs and double legs, right? But it was those transitions into what is definitely more sport-oriented combat that kind of I didn't have enough experience with. Yeah. That's the part that I struggled with most, not BJJ by itself and not the stand-up game. Is that in between where, you know, maybe you threw the guy down, but now he's tangling you up and you're trying to extricate yourself, and then he sweeps you to the ground, but then you flip it around on him, gain mount, and then that weird in between
Right.
that not all gyms focus a lot on. But as we see now with UFC, at least, is a pretty crucial part of the game. We see people like Usman or Khabib and others really dominate that wrestling to ground to standing back up kind of dynamic, and they can just keep dominating them in that area.
Yeah. That's a great example where like a particular refined skill in one little department really, you know, can be very important.
Yeah.
It could change the game entirely.
Yeah.
For sure.
And
So like, for example, I would, if we were to go to the traditional techniques, you know, and what they call oblique kick was not used until, well, not used widely, at least until John Jones started using it. And it proved to be a very effective weapon where he can offset the game of a better boxer like Gustafsson or, you know, guys like that, like not Machid, what's his name? Shogun, who are, you know, guys like that. They are very good boxers, but and John Jones is just not a boxer. He's not a boxer. He's more of a Muay Thai guy, you know. So that range is not comfortable for him, which was very clearly shown in his first fight with Gustafsson. But those oblique kicks, you know, and side kicks and you know, little stop kicks, they changed that because you can elongate that range, and a boxer is all of a sudden, with all his great boxing, is out of range,
right.
and that's like one of the very basic techniques, at least in you know, the praying mantis that we do, which is the oblique kick, the side kick, well, and the straight kick. They're taught in combination. Like basically the first striking technique you learn before you actually learn to do any punches, and I can see why. I mean, it is very effective in stopping somebody from reaching you.
Yeah, it's just efficient if you think about it. While probably because of Muay Thai and Japanese karate, a lot of people place a lot of value on roundhouse kicks, round kicks, whip kicks, whatever, right? And though it's a great tool, and there's different variations, but at the end of the day, that thing is powerful, but it's hard to hide. It's actually quite a skill and a science of reducing the tells and setting up for your roundhouses. But something like the oblique kick or the cross kick, the side kick, it's easy for you to go from point A to point B. It's relatively linear. You don't need to move your upper body that much to make it happen. It's quick. You don't have to unbalance yourself too much if it misses. It can even lead into you stepping into your next attack with your hands, or just another kick come from the other side. And it, especially if you chamber a certain way, it can be a low kick, it can be a high kick, right? Depending on how you chamber. And I think a lot of Sanda athletes and some of those combat silat guys do a really good job as far as being able to level change with that weapon and use hand-to-hand striking and takedowns, right? And so it's almost surprising from our perspective, perhaps, that it took so long for this tool to get picked up by people, because to the traditional martial artist standpoint, it's like, oh yeah, that's like the most basic one.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's a great technique, and of it's a traditional application, the way we apply it and the way it's been applied in MMA. That one is called in our style is called Furenzhao, or Furenzhao Li and Vai. The Li is the oblique kick, the Vai is the side kick variation. They kind of go together, like the three kicks. Anyway, so I'm thinking let's discuss some particular techniques. Let's go one, like let's switch between you and me. So
Let's do it.
yeah, what do you got?
I think so there's a lot of things that aren't necessarily unknown to the so-called MMA or combat sports world, but I think the kind of setups and techniques, or even just the whole system and training methodology in at least Mantis systems is what we can speak for, could be really useful to these guys as far as how to string these things together. If you're coming from like, oh, I got my boxing coach, I got my BJJ coach, I got my Muay Thai coach, now I got to turn myself into an MMA fighter. Well, the good news is there are traditional martial arts that purposely string together these different ranges in a sequence, because that is the mode of operation for this traditional MMA in a way, rather than taking three skill sets that are specialized in different ranges or overlapping ranges and trying to create a coherent game plan out of that. I'm not saying you should avoid sporting martial arts or only practice traditional. I'm just saying that there's value to the traditional martial arts way of doing it. So for one, there's, for example, there's a very classic knee, grab and knee technique that's actually found in, I don't think just Mantis, in fact, but pull and uni, right? This is very, very common. But we find in MMA that aside from, some flying knees and then the occasion where, you got the guy against the wall and they're kneeing them, we oftentimes don't see people stringing knees together in their chain of movements, right? It's usually in as like a surprise shock attack, or they've got him against the wall and then knee. Oh, okay. Adjust hips, try to avoid takedown, knee. You don't see it as part of the movement. But this teaches us to go from the outside, remove, attack center. You can do this to their arms. You could have their arms down, do this to the neck, and you can string this into any of your upper body attacks that you're already doing, which we discussed before. You can string along with things like side kick, oblique, cross kick, whatever, right? So it's not so much that the knee itself is revolutionary, it's the sort of handwork and how it's strung into how you strike and how you kick that I think things like Mantis can really, really offer. I think some styles of tights, you have something similar. I think Liu Mantis also has this. I know Liu Mantis is kind of the weird offshoot because they have like a fusion of two very different arts, but I think they got this too. It's a pretty common hand and knee pairing in traditional Wushu. So I think
Sure.
not necessarily knees are new to them, but stringing it together is one whole sequence. Okay, you kicked, they're open to attack. You don't just stand back and try to duke it out again. No, you kicked, going for a strike. The strike, it didn't knock them out, but it did a little damage, and now you have some contact against them. Great, move things aside. Knee, oh, they're stunned. Great, takedown. Right, we train to have this kind of progression to things, and not sit back when we've already drew blood, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. That's well, I mean, that's the great advantage of learning Taolu,
Yes.
because, well, a good Taolu,
Mhm.
where they actually set up on realistic scenarios, where it's like, okay, if this worked, then
Mhm.
you go to this technique. If it didn't, you go to that one. Like there's the different kind of scenarios that are played out in Taolu. Like, oh, okay, well, this didn't work. Okay, he ducked your punch, then you smash him with the back fist.
Right.
This
Right.
the thing.
I think that goes back to the sort of misunderstanding and misrepresentation thing that we're talking about before, which is that, especially for Mantis, we see a lot of the older or more core forms, or Taolu, having more of that kind of mentality in how they were created and as a system of training. But the Mantis I learned, a lot of it comes from 7-star, Qixing Tanangquan, 7-star praying mantis boxing. We can see that by sometime in the 1900s, they just start adding forms after forms after forms after forms. And even if each technique is legitimate, it becomes more of a technical collection or library,
Yeah.
if I'm going to put it in a nice way. Sometimes I think some of these guys really have become so divorced from fighting that they don't even really know what they're putting together, in my opinion. At the very least, what they're putting together doesn't have what we just talked about, which is that logical, time-tested, pressure-tested progression between, I attack at this angle from this range. If this get defended or didn't do the job, I change angle, or I change trajectory, or I switch levels the other side, and then I get closer in range, I bind them up, I do this, I trip, I whatever. Most of the core Taolu, like we see in Bengbu, Ruanjie, Bazhou, has a methodical progression of getting mechanical advantages, changing angles, changing levels, changing ranges on people, taking them out, usually going in, sometimes coming back out, but there's like there's a logical progression. And I think that is a vital, I think it was a vital part of ingraining that mentality of like, okay, the first thing got a reaction. I got a strike without getting hurt. How do I keep following up on that advantage, instead of what we see in combat sports sometimes, especially when it's not at the very highest level? We see people pop, okay, yeah, I got him. Okay, great. What happens
Right.
next?
Right.
So you see that too often, where the guy has like 5 seconds to recover. And in the traditional mindset, you cannot let that happen, right? And I think there's
Sure.
a value to the traditional way of training, even if it's just to supplement somebody's normal mainstream MMA training.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember I realized it's actually based on very realistic scenarios, where I was learning like a very short sword form.
Mm,
That's the first one we learned, which is eight. I think it's called 8 principles of seven. No, 7 principles of cutting.
mm,
7 ways you cut people up. So there's this move at the end where it's like you go like this and then you turn. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's done for aesthetic purposes. Then when we learned application, I was like surprised to find out that no, actually it's not. It's because the person is going to try to get away from that first move, and he's the only way he's going to move is that way. And you turn and you cut his hand off, you know,
yeah,
or something else. Yeah.
yeah,
So I was like, oh, okay, that's obviously based on some kind of an experience where people are, they are bound to move that way. You're going to have to follow this way. You have to turn around. He's not going to stand there.
Okay, so on that note, I have a experience, which is that one of the things I love about traditional martial arts is they take these almost instinctive gross motor styles of striking and they fine tune it for maximum power and control. Maybe you grab and punch so you don't let the other person's arm hit you. And they do it in a way where you have mechanical, I call mechanical because it's physically imposing mechanical advantages on your opponent rather than relying more on tempo changes and fakes and feints and hiding motion and motion. Not that we don't have some of that, but it's less reliant on that. It's less reliant on me staying in front of you and trying to fake you out and then landing a heavy blow. It's more about me forcing a reaction out of you where I know, okay, you're only going to move one of two or three ways. So I know my next thing is going to have to come from this angle. I haven't decided what exactly, but it's probably going to be something like this, right? And so I think in the traditional mindset, there's well, I want to reduce my variables as much as possible. I want to simplify the fight as much as possible because the fight is chaotic. There's a bunch of villagers with weapons and without weapons beating each other and killing each other up. I need to simplify each fight as much as possible, control this fight because the guy doesn't buy the fake and just decides to swing and I wasn't ready. That's not good, right?
Yeah.
But and I appreciate the high level boxing and Muay Thai that we see where people can play these mental strategies to such a high degree. But that said, I think the thing that traditional martial arts can bring to the table, definitely the mantis side of things, is this sort of mechanical control and reducing the variables in the striking game. Can you talk about that from your Meihua Tanglang experiences?
Can you
Oh yeah, I just kind of rambled a bit. So basically, like how, because I know you have a lot of Muay Thai boxing and also experience with Meihua Tanglang Quan, plum flower boxing. I guess maybe the best way to approach this would be, what would you say is one of the big differences and what Meihua Tanglang can offer as far as the striking game that boxing and Muay Thai do less of? Because from my experience, I noticed that there are certain things that the mantis style striking I was taught bring to the table, and one would be like applying some kind of mechanical advantage rather than like psychological.
It's several things. Okay, first of all, if you're playing with a boxer, you cannot play the boxing game where it's like feints and good, like that specific back and forth footwork. You cannot play that game. Any boxer is going to outplay you with that because he just does it better, obviously, because that's all he does.
Right.
So you just cannot do that. That's not going to work. What can work is actually applying the praying mantis strategies. And first thing I would say is that in boxing you're not allowed to grab hands. Basically, it happens. It happens in a clinch, here and there. But purposefully grabbing somebody's hands is not allowed.
Right.
So what we call bridging, and so on and so forth, is out of the question, sort of. Well, it still happens instinctively here and there, but it's not the thing. So, like, for example, a lot of, there's different styles of boxing, obviously. There's people that box with one hand forward. There's people that have the Philly shell type defense, but a lot of the times they do cover up like this, right? I'm not talking about really high level boxers that almost never do that, but that 99% of the boxers are not Floyd Mayweather, and not Pernell Whitaker, right? So you cover up when instinctively almost when there's an attack coming your way and you don't know what it is really. So you cover up, you move your head, and you try to move out of the way. So disrupting that pattern is fairly easy actually, because you want to attack so that they cover up. And then, like if we're in a boxing setting and you're not allowed to do anything other than what is allowed in boxing, you can sort of put pressure on those arms right there. Like you cannot grab somebody's arm when he's punching you. It's hard. Well, you can, but it's a lot harder, right? But you can grab somebody's arm when it's right here. When it's when somebody's covering up, you can press that against somebody's head, for example, or you can remove that hand and you can place your punch there. So that would be like one of the basic drills that we do in praying mantis actually, which is in a pattern called Sauduida. We do a drill. We're going to have a video of that, where you take away that lead hand. You attack the lead hand that's forward, whatever it is doing. You remove that, and you attack from that side. So. Even though you're not holding the hand, for example, your hand is in a glove, you cannot really hold, although you sort of can, but you can sort of push it aside and clear the path for your, whatever punches you have coming from that side. So as far as hand work, there's a lot you can do. Another example would be using footwork. I did not put the video of that yet, but I think I should later. I'll make a video of that.
Okay.
Where mantis type footwork could work really well against boxing type footwork, where you can trap feet, not necessarily sweeping, but just placing your feet in a position where you're blocking the movement. And striking at the same time, which is a very, very common technique in all of the styles of mantis.
Yep.
Where you step as you move and you attack, you switch from left side stance to right side stance or otherwise, and you trap the feet momentarily, obviously, but that's all you need. By placing your foot on the outside of your opponent's foot and forcing him to step aside or be all of balance for a second and attacking him. So those things that you can use against a boxer in a boxing setting. I'm not even going to, like, you can oblique kick him. Well, you can't in boxing, right? Obviously that's
right.
That's not going to work.
Right.
So it's like that could work really well. Another thing that would work that does work, another thing that does work would be the so the previous one is the fan or low technique, and this one is T or Wa, which is the upward blocking, like that. Right. Which seems weird, and a lot of I heard a lot of boxers, including including my father, say that could never work. that could never work. And I was like, I was under the impression that it can't, but it can in certain scenarios. Like the hand moving in is too fast to be blocked like that,
Mhm.
but the hand moving backwards. And why would you want to block the hand that's moving backwards? Well, you're not really blocking it. You're pushing it aside, upwards.
You're like delaying it.
Right, you're delaying the return,
Mhm.
and this way you have the body open, and this is exactly why it goes to the body. Usually, the attack goes to the body, right? That could be very effective, and you are pretty well defended, especially if you're dealing with the boxer from punches coming from up, because you are sort of under that. You're defending yourself with your own shoulder and hand, and this one's pushing the other hand up. So
Mhm.
you can sort of do that in the flow. You
Mhm.
have to be pretty fast to do that, but you don't have to be that fast because the hand moving backwards is actually much slower than it is moving forward, right? So as you avoided the initial, impact, duck under it and attack the body. This kind of techniques that they really do work well. Actually, another thing, I did not put that in the video, but maybe later. Actually, catching hands does work, especially with the big gloves. It works even better. It
Mhm.
works better than with MMA gloves. Like I heard a lot of people say that, like, oh, what are you gonna do? You're gonna catch hands? Like, that's not gonna work. It does work. I have tried it. You have to know how to catch them. Like it's not one hand; it's two hands, which is in the Mantis style. It's a lot of times there's grabs like that, right?
Yep.
So you can't actually hold somebody's hand between your two hands, but I'm going to put the video of that later.
I remember
It
I remember
works.
one of my early proudest moments because I did a lot of Western style boxing in college.
Mhm.
Just I was away from the Mantis school, so just couldn't do it there. But I remember one of my proudest moments was the guy had done a jab, but he had a weird habit of leaving this hand a little low for whatever reason. And I remember I had like parried the jab, and I just went in, boom, I got both of his hands, and I angled and gave him a hook, and I was like, oh wow, it worked. I was like, yeah. But it was just one of those moments where it's not visual boxing, it's like kinesthetic boxing,
Yeah.
boxing by feel.
Yeah.
I felt his
Right.
hand go back, and as his hand was going back, I went in with it,
Right.
and then I had the angle that I wanted. And that was like that big opening moment for me where I was like, I shouldn't just be relying on my eyes. I should also be relying on my sense of touch.
Hmm. Hmm.
And in that context, so much of the taolu and the striking in Mantis makes a lot of sense because you got a hand on somebody's arm, you got a hand on their elbow, you got a hand on something, and you're like, oh, I can feel where he's going. It's
Yeah.
it's a different thing than trying to just catch things without any reference.
Sure.
But
Yeah, absolutely.
even then, like it's still doable. And people say, oh well, uh, they'll never throw large looping strikes and all that. And well, I don't know. In MMA, you see it. Maybe not maybe in boxing is less, but
Boxing also,
you
yeah. I
still
mean,
see
that
it.
depends on where the boxer is coming from. He might have like a pre-learned bad habit of throwing that stuff
Yeah,
that knocks people out.
it does.
Why?
Yeah,
Why not? Like,
yeah.
look at Deontay Wilder.
Oh yeah,
I mean, look, dude has like 40 fights, 40 knockouts, and
yeah,
he only lost to one guy.
yeah.
That's it. And
That's true.
by the way, one of the best boxers out there, and he knocked him down in both fights uh, several times with those looping shots.
Right.
So it's not that bad.
And that's the irony is that people say, oh well, people won't use those big looping strikes, but you see in boxing like that. But then also Big Country Nelson in MMA, we saw
Yeah.
he's not the only one he's just famous for. I mean, the recent fight, Bam Bam Tuivasa and Derek Lewis. I mean, You think
Yeah.
you think there's nothing that's going to come looping overhead?
All right. Yeah. Or like Francis Ngannou,
Mhm.
his boxing until recently
Until
was
recently.
all looked like swimming,
Oh yeah, and
like that.
all of those will hurt somebody. They're not.
Yeah, look, he knocked out, over him, and he's not like nobody. He's a world kickboxing champion,
Yeah,
K1.
yeah.
How
Oh,
you know
who's
how
that other guy?
you know
With the mustache and the short mohawk. He would throw that over the top looping punch.
was it the Lineker?
No,
No,
what's his name?
somebody else.
What's his name? Oh, I'm
Oh,
forgetting.
I know who you mean. Yeah, the the,
But
the mustache
he
guy.
had the
Yeah,
mustache, and he would always throw that looping
oh,
punch over, catch somebody, and then boom, 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 right? It's like people say, oh, you can't use this block because people will never punch that way. And then at the same time, I see street fights and MMA and boxing, I see people punching that way and knocking people
yeah,
out.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. Look, even in boxing, like Gennady Golovkin, for example, who's a very well-schooled, Soviet-style
Mm.
boxer, but he throws that
Oh, yes.
overhand kind of punch like that, and he knocks people out with that, even if
Yes.
it lands on the forehead, which is
Yeah.
supposed to be the hardest point,
Oh, yeah.
But if you throw it like he does,
Mm.
it knocks people out cold.
And he actually, I'm very interested in because he plays not using the handwork that we discussed precisely in the same way, but he will press his forearm and shoulder into people's arms and get them as they push back or an angle or push them, and as they try to create some space, boom, from the other side, boom. He plays, tactically speaking, a similar game to what we're discussing, but in
Yeah.
using more shoving and pressing in certain angles rather than opening specifically with the hands.
Well, it's not an accident. I mean,
Yeah.
like this is a technique he has, which is basically a wrestling technique. He pushes somebody off balance and then unloads some, you know, haymakers there,
Yeah.
and yeah, that
And
works really well if you unbalance somebody.
right. And hey, and Mantis, a lot of Mantis footwork and striking, the way it's and handwork, the way it's put together, it's kind of meant to keep somebody unbalanced or adjusting the way you made them
Yeah,
adjust, and that's
right.
that's kind of the point. So I really like Triple G in that sense, not just because he's a cool fighter, but because he's in the boxing ring from his own background, tactically speaking, at least, coming to very similar conclusions.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
froze for a second. So uh, go ahead, your technique.
my technique. Okay, so as expected, I focused a little more on the clinch, wrestling, grappling centric stuff, and I think just some bare basics. For example, people say, "Oh, you can't use this stuff because people don't let you stand up wrestle the same way." But we have uh, tripping them by sickling their leg from one side. We can come out to the outside and trip them over. And oftentimes for these kind of moves, reaping their legs, you want them to have one arm extended to give you an opportunity to off balance them.
Right.
And you say, oh, well, you don't see these moves done that much in wrestling unless you fully clinch them up and you pushing them over and pinning them down as part of the move, which is not bad either. But done in the traditional martial arts way, you say, okay, you don't see that often. But again, I think that comes down to how you use your hands and how you move your feet. How you move your hands determine whether you're going to balance them. How you move your feet determines if you even have the opportunity angle-wise, right? And so like a typical reaping leg you see in Japanese judo might be called osotogari, where you grab the person and you step to the outside and boom, trip them over. Actually, there are a lot of opportunities where someone's arm is outstretched and it's easy to get that opportunity. However, you can't paw down and back up. You can't just cover. You have to drive in and meet the strike and angle as you do. And when you do that, you can get these throws that people say don't work as often as, double leg or single leg, things like that.
Mhm.
It's all about how you decide to engage. And it comes back to this kinesthetic side to striking. When you think, I'm not just going to paw it away or knock it aside, I'm going to and stick to it and angle with it and move in with it. And if you can do that, then a lot of these stand-up throws, classical throws, actually work quite well, rather than having to make it a takedown. So, I'm gonna be putting a few of those examples, but it's and along with the MMA people in the MMA world applying it, but it's a lot more doable if you have that understanding of the striking game, which, like we said, some boxers, some MMA fighters are starting to do or have been doing, but it still doesn't seem to be a mainstream concept or practice of having like a, empty air striking, but then like a sticky striking. And that's not quite a mainstream concept outside of maybe Wing Chun sticky hand drills. People have like, oh yeah, I've heard of that thing, but that doesn't really work. Okay, whatever, right? People aren't sort of used to that concept. So what if you have that, you can start unlocking a lot of these classical throws, which provide the amplitude in the actual takedown and give you the choice whether you want to grapple with them on the ground or knee on belly and just start beating their face in, rather than being forced into, okay, I have to take side control now. I have to go into mount. I am stuck in his guard now. Because when you do a full takedown, you slam down, sometimes you end up in a position that, whether or not it's an advantageous position, you are on the ground with them. Right? In the traditional martial arts concept, you don't necessarily want to do that. And so this type of striking we just talked about gives you this type of throwing that gives you the choice. I can take the knee onto the belly, or if this was Pride rules, I can stomp his head in. But of course, we don't have Pride anymore, so rest in peace.
I think they have that in some competitions. They still have that.
Yeah, I don't think
One FC, no?
UFC Bell and Bellator don't. I'm not sure about ONE FC because
I think One FC. I
I've
think One
seen
FC.
some
I've seen
weird stuff.
some stomping there. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen them allow some of it, but you don't see soccer kicks to the head. But I think I've seen somebody get stomped on the stomach. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I have to look at
I've seen is what's his name? I think I might be mistaken. I think it was Mighty Mouse. That UFC champion, one of the most.
Did he get
You
kneed while he
know,
was on the ground? I forget what it
he
was.
got kneed when he was on the ground. He got knocked out,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
I was like, wow, you changed one little thing,
Yeah.
and it changes a whole lot because he's a great fighter,
He's a
great, one
phenomenal.
of the greatest. Yeah,
Yeah.
amazing reflexes and everything, the way he chains his stuff together. But like he fought under different rules, and you change this one thing. That's like I hear that a lot from the proponents of MMA. They're saying, okay, so we're going to change one thing, everybody's going to adapt right away. not necessarily, not that fast. It takes time, to reprogram yourself, and it shows. I mean, if this guy could allow this to happen with all of his reflexes and experience and talents, um, I'm not sure about your average, MMA fighter, how well he's gonna adapt to getting kicked in the nuts, for example.
Well,
That's not gonna happen
you can tell by the way they
right
stand if
away.
they don't train for that.
Yeah, it's not gonna happen right away for sure. Actually, when I was in high school, it happened to me. All I did was boxing, and I ran into a sambo guy, and he beat the shit out of me with my boxing, and because I didn't wrestle at all. I was like, wow, that's interesting. So instead of learning sambo, which would be a good idea, I went and learned, and I went and into some karate. But what I took away from that you can actually kick people in the legs and in the nuts. And the next time we fought, I actually kicked him because he was standing right in front of me in that wrestling stance, kind of. He was trying to wrestle me, so I kicked him right there. Yeah, I was like, wow, that's very effective. There goes the sambo.
And that's another thing too. That brings us to one concept in a lot of these traditional martial arts, which is uh, if you're going to block, you have to block, bridge the gap, and attack at the same time. If you're going to parry, you should parry, depress the arm, get some kind of control, and attack at the same time. If you're going to block a kick, you can drive your knee through and then hit them, or you can grab the kick and then throw them. It's like every time you defend, you should punish them. You cannot let them. There's no like, I mean, matrix head movement, all that is really cool, but that doesn't exist in these traditional martial arts, because why would you let somebody do that?
Right.
Right. And so, that's another one of these major differences in mindset, but it's simple to say, but it results in a very different way of fighting. You could be using all the same strikes, but you're going to use it very differently with that different mindset. Yeah, for sure. It's you add one little thing, and if people haven't prepared for it, it's
Yeah.
very different.
And it always looks different from the outside also. Like I remember when I was still doing my boxing, and my father, who done a lot of boxing, he was like we were watching some was it kickboxing fights, and somebody was doing a spinning back fist. He was like, what? That's ridiculous. You're never going to hit a boxer with that. That's never going to work.
Uh-huh.
And he was talking from experience of boxing. It's not a joke. I mean, he's a heavyweight.
Yeah.
Right. So he knows. And I was like, yeah, okay. Yeah. He was like, this is too slow. That's not going to hit anybody. Right. And now we have like 2022. We have, for the past 10 years, everybody was knocking everybody with the back fist. Works really well. You just need to set it up properly. And that's another one of my techniques that I'm going to demonstrate, which is Fanbei Chui, which is exactly that. And interesting thing is, I found a video when I was looking for videos of good back fist knockouts. I found a video that actually does even more. It's like one of the moves we do in Fan Mao Chuan form, where you back fist somebody, but then you add another punch on top of that. And I found a guy who does exactly that, like just almost like in the form, except if he did it like in the form, he would actually hit the guy with that second punch.
Oh, did he not advance with it?
He didn't advance with it. It was like a well, it was hard to advance with it. I see why, because his feet were he didn't know he was gonna hit it, right? So you can't just like commit just like that. It's kind of dangerous, right? But if he did, he'd land another punch, but he knocked the guy with a back fist anyway. So yeah, that's another good one that
Yeah.
until recently everybody was saying that's not gonna work, you know.
Yeah. And what's crazy to me is, and this again goes back to the misrepresentation and misunderstanding, is that this stuff was working. And sure, maybe there was a reduction in number of practitioners from this tradition fighting the combat sports. But once you start having people delve into these things or have a solid background in these things, but round out the corners, round out the areas where they're more deficient in, oh, you start seeing spinning back fists, you start seeing chopping fists, you start seeing oblique kicks, you start seeing spinning side kicks, spinning whatever. And it's like people are now realizing that just because someone doesn't know how to integrate it into the fight doesn't mean that thing is useless. It has its ideal range, it has its ideal position or timing. If you can make the guy give that to you,
Sure.
All right. So people
Yeah,
say
like with
that
the
throws don't work, like, over shoulder throws don't work. But it has happened in MMA. And then you look at, oh, well, judo throws, it doesn't work without the gi. Who who is Ronda Rousey?
right.
Who was Carl Parisian before that? Like there were people with a serious, solid background in say throwing techniques, whether it's sambo, judo, whatever, and they are using it in MMA. And you mentioned something, having your feet correct for the striking combination allows it to work or not work. You might whiff, right? Because you're not going to continue to stay in the ideal range. The same goes for the relationship between your hands and your hips and your feet when you're trying to execute these throws. You can't do them if you don't move a certain way, and you can't do them if you don't commit. Right? You have to commit wholeheartedly, no hesitation, just go in with that combination of handwork and footwork that you assume have drilled over and over and over again. Right? And then you can pull off an uchimata or ogoshi style throw in an MMA setting. Right? And then people are like, oh my God, it works. Of course it works. People have been wrestling and doing and judoka have been kicking people's ass, in their heyday, doing this stuff. Of course it works.
Sure.
It's just that
Sure.
I guess in a way we forgot. And then now that's getting reintegrated into the popular mainstream fighting modality of today. Now people are like, oh, it works if you have the right kind of system of training.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So technique from you.
Well, that
For
was
our
one right there.
MMA. Oh, you had one.
That was
Okay.
one right
All
there.
right.
See how I slipped that in?
All right. All right. Yeah. Okay. Oh, wait.
Hello?
Hold on 1 second. Yeah. I can hear you, but okay. Yeah. It was frozen for like a couple of seconds. Yeah. Okay. So I one is our favorite technique, is bread and butter for our style, is la tiao, which
Mm.
is like a foot sweep. There's a video of that, and I wish I knew that when I did Muay Thai,
Oh,
because we have sweeps, but it's like it's different. It's from the clinch, like. I mean, okay, you can sort of do lateral for the clinch, but it's better if you're not clinching. Actually, it actually works better at a mid range where you throw some hands, tangle somebody up, end up on the side,
mhm.
like attack from the side and sweep. I wish I knew this one because this one would fit right into all of Muay Thai stuff, like ideally.
Yeah, yeah. One I
Yeah,
wish
this is
that
really good one.
I knew when I was hitting up MMA gyms. It's weird because again, I knew, but I didn't really understand how to transition things. Um, but sometimes, when you're up against the wall, sometimes people push back on you, and you end up kind of locked horns, right? And then you
Yeah.
just kind of get pushed off, and then maybe they go for a knee or they slip under to try to get a takedown. But you've seen flipping the cart, fansa, right? And then
Right?
do a chow kick on that side, boom, flip them over. If you're locked horns like that, in hooks or under an overhook, that's such an easy thing. Rock one way, they start resisting, boom, the other side, and then kick their ankle essentially, or hook their ankle
Right.
as you flip them over. And I look back, and actually last week I landed this like 5-6 times in a row doing strike chow. And I look back and I'm like, man, I could have been doing this on every like push off against the wall back when I was hitting these MMA gyms. I just didn't make that connection at that time. Oh well, now I know. But yeah, chow. Oh, it's honestly, it's one of my favorite moves that in Mantis actually you don't see that much of in other wushu systems. I don't see
Yeah,
that much.
it's not the way it's done in Manchester, at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some hooking of the legs and stuff, but not like that. Like not like a sucker kick slash sweep. You
Yeah.
know.
I mean, I see it in Mongolian wrestling, and I see some Swijak people use it
Oh,
a little bit. But
oh
you
yeah, in Mongolian wrestling, it's all over the place. Like they
yeah,
do that a lot. Yeah,
yeah. But you don't see it as much in other Wushu styles. Yeah. It's a really
right,
cool thing. It's one of our favorite weapons, I think. I think we can both agree on that.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's so easy to use. I mean, once you know it, I mean, it's really low risk, high reward technique. Because you can change so many things to it. Other throws, strikes, whatever. Yeah, it's in between technique where you're stuck somewhere. It's perfect. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah. So the last one I got is not a technique, but more of a principle. So when I was just starting the praying mantis, Shifu Prophetov told me, it was like, well, it's like if you want to see sort of what it's supposed to look like, look at what Fyodor Emelianenko or Randy Couture or guys like that, like Diaz Brothers or DC do, as far as what they call the dirty boxing,
Mm.
which is holding and hitting.
Mhm.
And as I was learning, I was like, oh wow. It, this is how it's supposed to work. You kind of, you throw a hand, it gets stuck there, you grab, and you punch. He gets away, you grab that hand, you punch, and so forth. You kind of putting it from one hand to the other, so to speak. You're grabbing onto stuff.
Yeah.
So that principle in praying mantis is called Hui Shou Bu Kun, which is the hand doesn't return empty.
Yes.
So throw something, you don't just pull back and hit. You throw and you grab, and you punch something, or you do not, but you grab on and you keep working. So that, I got a video for that.
Yeah. And actually, jumping off of that, my last thing is that while you do that, your footwork as you do that can also be turned into tripping them as you do that, right? If you stick and then you strike and you start tipping them one way, you can, instead of stepping that way, you can hook the leg on that side. And boom, there's a takedown.
Right.
And I think that's one of the, I think we touched upon something really important here, which is the kinesthetic factor, the grabbing and hitting. It ensures a certain level of control. Like, okay, I'm not controlling one arm, but I am controlling the other arm, and I'm hitting you, right? I know this one's not going to hurt me, and I think that's something that's born out of just a more life or death type situation where you really got to just reduce variables, control, destroy them as safely as possible. But I think it's a really useful thing in MMA. And I found in my own experiences that ability to climb the people's arms, no matter if you're in a more wrestling setting, like say Shuaijiao, which is very just stand up wrestling, or in a more MMA setting, or in boxing, it makes you really annoying on one end and just really oppressive on the very highly skilled end, because you end up feeling like you're getting entangled and it's hard to get out. And as soon as you try to step someplace, oh, then they hooked your foot, then you're off balance. And you try to swing, oh, they lifted it up, and now you got hit in the body, and you get a little lower. Now you got grabbing the head, and the knee's coming, and the constant angle changes, unbalancing, grabbing, sticking, it makes it very hard for you to have a successful counterattack, or a counterattack that the mantis boxer can't feel coming. And of course, if he feels it coming, he doesn't do anything, well, then that's his fault. But the system kind of takes you down a path that reduces their chances of recovery the longer it goes. You blitz them, and then as you start gaining your angles, as you start getting your control over them, this side, grab and move in, trip, whatever, they start having fewer and fewer ways out. And so unless they're just far better at that game than you, or they can stay within their ideal range, it's I don't know how to say it, like an increasingly rewarding strategy almost.
Yeah. Like the Diaz brothers are very good at that, because it's distracting. It's like, okay, he's not hitting me with anything hard, but it's just annoying as hell. It's like, he's just pulling you this way and hitting you from the other side, and it's like slapping you, and this, it's really, really annoying. It be destructive, like there's a lot of people saying they have really good boxing. I don't think they have really good boxing. I don't think they have really good strategy as far as using, whatever dirty tactics that they have, which is great. It's awesome.
Yeah, and that's a funny thing. I think that's part of the misunderstanding part that we're talking about before, which is that when you come at it from a pure Western boxing standpoint, you think, oh, when I can dominate the tempo and use these straight lines to deliver power, and then come in to finish, that is a beautiful thing, and that is one concept of the striking game, right? But then there's this other concept of the striking game, which is, instead of controlling that timing, is controlling the spacing and posture of the other person. And that's kind of more where it is boxing coming from, or some of these guys like the Diaz brothers, they're pure Western box from the pure Western boxing perspective. They're probably not the best representatives, but in terms of striking strategy, it's pretty good. You know, they're definitely using more of a strategy of keeping the guy, controlling the spacing and posture of the person, and keeping them off balance, not sometimes physically and sometimes mentally. You know, and if they packed way more power in it, they might even just take people out a lot earlier. Yeah,
for sure.
Really cool stuff.
All right, so I got a couple of more questions.
All right, yeah, let's bring it.
All right, so we discussed some basic good things about Chinese martial arts and how it could be used. Now the question is, what is missing? Why we are not seeing Wushu representatives a whole lot? Well, we see some, like that have some background in Wushu. Recently John Ling, is a Shuaijiao athlete, and it's, it shows in some of her clinch work and things like that. But we're not seeing really, a whole lot of Wushu proponents. What is missing? Let's discuss that.
Oh, I think this is I think there's a lot of angles you could look at this from. I mean, there's the overall angle, which is just that the Wushu is it's definitely more of a hobby outside of Asia. And even within Asia, there's people who do it competitively, and there's people who do it as a hobby. But then the MMA world is only more recently getting into East Asia, Central Asia, Africa, etc. Right? So it's aside from Japan, it was mostly an American, like Brazilian, American, Japanese thing for quite a while. It's only just starting to get into Asia. And then, of course, if we look at America, a lot of people doing Wushu in America are more on the hobbyist side of things. So I think part of it is demographics, right? But I think it does go deeper than that. May also be just money. Like I said earlier, I think Sanda is a great intermediary step for a person to take their Wushu, go into MMA. Sanda is a great place to pressure test to see, hey, do you have your stuff? I think similarly for Sambo, combat Sambo is a great way to see if your Sambo is trained in a way that applies well for MMA, right? And I think there's a combat jujitsu, at least there is in Taiwan, and it's a great way for judo people and jujitsu people to do a similar thing. It's very similar to combat Sambo, actually. So I think there's also another factor, which is that you look at Sambo Sanda competitions in a lot of places. These are just smaller scale local things that are done by little organizations, and you got to pay money to attend. Right? This is not like boxing. Sure, it might be different in China, but then China is also not as integrated with the rest of the MMA talent pool. So I think a big part of this is just the economics and demographics of it all. Kind of like, it's almost like they miss each other in a way. But there may also be cultural or training styles or whatever that make people more adverse to trying it out. I'm not sure. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm thinking more in terms of like how can a guy like me, but younger, practicing, traditional martial arts, go into competitions. And I would say that a lot of times it's the problem is not enough sparring partners if you want to spar, number one,
Oh,
because
yes.
like let's say like we're relatively small school here, it's like something like maybe 10 people or so, practicing really in Moscow, um, and they are mainly not of the age that are likely to go and compete, like me.
Hmm.
Like there's the younger guys, and they have gone and they have competed in MMA, for example, and some guys from the early on, like in the 90s, they have gone to like Kyokushin and competitions and boxing and so on and so forth. But overall, I mean, it's usually uh, guys who are too old to compete. Like, I don't want to go compete. I'm 46. I don't want to fight with like 20-year-old guys that have ambitions, right? They're gonna smash me, right? So there's not enough. Like we were getting, from my experience, we're getting this guy, one guy, right? He wanted to go compete in MMA, right? So who's he gonna spar with? There's like only a couple of people that could spar with him. I could spar with him and a couple other guys,
Ah, yeah.
and so he had to go to an MMA gym for sparring, for example, right? And another thing that's missing a lot of times is fitness training, which is like this. Okay, he's pretty strong because he does some wushu, strength exercises, which is good. It's sufficient as far as strength. But like his stamina might be lacking, for example. So he needs to do some additional, running or whatever, to get that level of athleticism, and
Yes.
you need time for that. And if you're a hobbyist, you only got so much time, to really seriously train. So I think that those are the main problems for guys like me. I'm not talking about, guys like me but younger. Let's say he's like 18 and he wants to compete, but he's a traditional guy. you know Training partners, time for additional training, for this kind of stuff.
That's a great point. That's a great point. In fact, I've actually had these very same issues myself. Um, for example, let's see, sparring partners, right? It's not that hard to find a sparring partner, say, who has a karate background or a boxing background or a BJJ background. But
Yeah.
do you have a sparring partner who can give you the environment for your skill set in the MMA arena? That's a little different, right?
Yeah.
Because as we know, there's MMA guys who are good at boxing, but they're not necessarily good at applying boxing in MMA. They're not necessarily good at applying boxing when someone's kicking and trying to take them down.
Right.
There's people who are good wrestlers, but not great wrestlers when they're taking knees, right? And so you need an environment of sparring partners of different styles, personal, styles of fighting that can cater to that skill set you have in the MMA environment. And that's the toughest part for me personally, is that it's so hard to find a group of traditional style martial artists who
Mhm.
can also provide that for you, because it's, I don't care what martial art you're doing. Just like I said before, if you're doing pure just BJJ, uh yeah, it's good at what it's good at. But if you don't have somebody who can give you the pressures that the MMA arena is going to give you, but also give you those little opportunities that you need to take as a jiu-jitsu practitioner under those constraints, you're never going to be able to transition into that arena that effectively. And those guys have to be strong, they have to be fit, they need to have their cardio, they have to They have to be on point in that regard. They have to be an athlete, right? It can't be a, oh, 5-10 minutes later, let's just sit down and talk about stuff. Like, that's fun, but that's a hobbyist level of training, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need people who can put in rounds back to back for an hour, 2 hours if you're going to go to that level of competition. And unfortunately, and maybe this ties into the socioeconomic type situations that I was talking about before, but there's just not many of those type of environments for traditional martial artists. But if you have a boxing background, there's a lot of MMA gyms who have a boxing coach. If you have a Muay Thai background, same thing. Freestyle wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But outside of those things that kind of got mixed in early on, for the traditional martial arts, not many. Even karate, there's just a few notable gyms, like the Machidas, for example, who regularly use their karate skill set within the rule set of MMA, and spar and pressure test it that way. And they're and the couple others are kind of unique in having that as their focus. Most traditional training groups aren't that. First, if they're catering to hobbyists, that's, it's understandable. But second of all, even if they aren't, it's just it's very hard to gather all those people together when sort of, I don't know, the social infrastructure is not already there. Because you can say you're coming from a boxing background, you're going to MMA. Well, if MMA doesn't work out for you, maybe the boxing coach at that gym can still steer you as far as your boxing career, right? Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu now has a pretty good competition circuit. There's people who live off of this stuff as competitors. So if MMA doesn't work out for you, maybe you try purely just BJJ. If pure BJJ doesn't work out for you, maybe you try the MMA route, right? Maybe it'll work out. And so, yeah, it's finding good sparring partners for traditional martial artists who want to be competitive in MMA, whether they plan to make that a whether they plan to make that their career or not is one thing, but even just to be able to do that is limited. Yeah, even here in Taiwan, it's not that many. There's a few guys who are trying to do it, but it's less a community and more a few individuals.
Right.
So it's yeah, that is a problem. How do you think we can overcome that? Because I think we both agree, we see these techniques being employed and we think there's advantages to the way we train them, right? The system of training. But this is actually a pretty big hurdle. This is something that a couple people can't overcome. You and I can train with the right kind of people and be good at fighting. It's just as a whole, in general, we can handle ourselves. But how to turn that into, how to build momentum on that, how to get more people to be able to do this at a high competitive level. How do we overcome that challenge, do you think?
Well, I think this is a topic for like a whole different conversation, because as we were speaking, I wrote down like 5 points that I would like to discuss that will take another 2-3 hours to discuss probably. But if we answer those questions, I think we can come up with a realistic plan, not just abstractly, but seriously on what it is. And those questions are, I'm not proposing we answer them now, because that's
just for the future.
going to take forever. But I would say first thing would be to define what is Wushu. What is Wushu training? Second question is, what is Wushu training? Third, what are the steps to you need to take to compete as a Wushu fighter in MMA? What are the things you need to add on to your training, for example? And what are the aspects of your own traditional training that you need to concentrate on? You cannot concentrate on everything. For example, you cannot just concentrate on forms, if you're going to do fighting, this kind of thing. force is what is unique about Wushu that could be offered to MMA community. Like BJJ, as I think a traditional martial art, has done that. They found a thing that they could offer. Karate has done that, and
Mhm.
Taekwondo, because like when Machida won UFC title, everybody all of a sudden took this stuff seriously.
Mhm.
And I know guys from Russia, for example, because we have a lot of good karate fighters from Soviet Union, former Soviet Union, that were hired out to the gyms in Brazil to learn some karate stuff because everybody was like, oh, well, this is the new breed of fighters we need to fight. We
Mhm.
need to know how to work with that. Nobody knew how to work with that.
Mhm.
A lot of people were saying, oh, wow, like how you fight that? That's very unique, right? So we need to find out what is unique. I kind of have an idea, but I think it needs to a lot of thinking. But what is unique about Wushu that Wushu can offer to the world of combat sports? And the last thing is, how do I stay with my traditional training and do MMA? Because you cannot dedicate equal amounts of time to everything. So it has to be both in one package. So those are the like sort of they are sort of the same question, but those are like 5 questions I mapped out. Maybe we can talk about it next
Yeah,
time.
yeah, that gives me some ideas. That's a very interesting set of questions. I feel you're looking at Wushu and MMA from different angles with each of those questions. I like it. We should definitely talk about that sometime.
All
Are there
right.
any closing statements you want to make about Wushu and Mantis boxing, Tangangquan, as well as MMA and technique and all that for this conversation?
Oh, okay. Well, I think it's inevitable that as China opens up more, and as more people are from China, for example, and maybe from Taiwan and from other places where Wushu is still around, traditional Wushu is still around. Uh, I think we are bound to see at some point a splash of Wushu athletes with very clear Wushu background techniques that will make the same change to the game as jiu-jitsu did at some point, and like uh, karate and taekwondo did. I think it's inevitable. A lot of it maybe is political, perhaps, geographical. It's just hard to travel, maybe they could, this kind of stuff. Same thing happened with like Soviet style boxing at the one point because it was closed off where the Soviet athletes were not allowed to compete in professional boxing. Look at the rankings of boxing now since the fall of the Soviet Union. It started with like Klitschko brothers, and now we have some of the best boxers. I'm not saying all of the best, but some of the best boxers are from that school. Lomachenko, Usyk, Gvozdyk, um, you know, Beterbiev, Bivol, I don't know, Golovkin, Roman Karmazin. There's like there's a whole lot of boxers that came from that background that have since, if not taken over the boxing, but they have made a huge,
Yeah.
imprint. They made a big splash there. In the boxing world, boxing is changing due to some of the techniques that they are showing, they're introducing, like especially Lomachenko and Usyk. Those like highly technical guys. That's not an accident. So I think if if it becomes easier for wushu athletes to compete uh, in combat sports around the world, we will see. I think the future is pretty bright. but we need to do something about it. We cannot just wait for it.
Right.
And I think this kind of video, which demonstrates the validity of the techniques, can attract the people that are actually practicing it, to maybe they're younger than me, to try it out. If somebody is like 15, 16, and he's watching this video and he finds this interesting, maybe he can seek out some good traditional training and figure out what he needs to do to make it
yeah, absolutely. Between this one
more applicable.
and our part 2 conversation, for sure. I think that was great. I think all I can add to that is, this stuff has value from a combative sense. It has value. It actually does add something to the game that we see certain individuals apply to varying degrees, but it packages all of that together in a system of training, instead of being like, oh, I kind of do it this way for this technique, or I occasionally do it this way, or this is just my personal style. No, there's a methodology, right? And as you and I know, a system allows somebody to be able to do something with repeated success and not have rely on just their personal inclination or attributes. This allows a whole group of people to go through this and get those results. So I think this stuff has value. We see people using elements of this. We just haven't seen somebody yet who trains all of this and is applying it in the ring or in the octagon repeatedly and successfully. And I hope, and I don't think we're too far off from it, but I hope we do see that someday. And I hope we do see that from somebody who wants to make a career out of it. Because I'm sure if you really wanted to, Joseph, you can work really hard for a year and do an MMA fight. And you might do really well in the smoke show. I could probably do that. But I we've spoken personally, and I realized like that willingness to like bang and make MMA a career, that starts to peter out in the late 20s unless you're in it and you're like doing it all the time. And as soon as you stop competing regularly, the spirit is a little different. I think there really is something to that. Around 18 to 28 stretch where, as a young man, maybe young woman too, you're ready to bang, and as you mature as a fighter, maybe in your early 30s, you're still doing it. And we see a lot of our most successful MMA fighters coming from a long background of competing in wrestling or competing in kickboxing or other disciplines before if they join MMA late. That's kind of they had never stopped fighting, basically. So yeah, I really do hope that we get people who are interested in fighting professionally, but find value in this traditional martial arts to see this video, and maybe we can be part of revitalization of this thing.
Yeah. Come to us.
All right. I guess that'll end it then.
All right.
Thank you so much. Let's do this again.
Thank you.